The clip you just saw was a clip from a game called Omori, a simple game with RPG elements about a boy who is conflicted with the guilt of his sister's death. But what makes this clip disturbing? Well, in order to answer that, we need to go into a deep analysis of psychological horror. When looking at the horror genre, it is clear that psychological horror is one of the most infamous of the few subgenres, right besides the likes of analog horror and mascot horror. The Shining, Us, and even a few games such as DDLC and Silent Hill are big examples in the topic of psychological horror. But before we can dive deep into the functions of psychological horror, we need to define it. Psychological horror is generally defined by using the state of mind and emotion in order to give off a sense of dread or uneasiness. It isn't reliant on jump scares, instead, it makes the viewer feel dread and tension. It likes to put the viewer on edge, and it specializes in taking fear and putting it into the hands of the viewer. It takes the inherent anxiety that is within the human mind and induces it into the viewer through exploiting the survival instincts that are buried deep into the human psyche. Referring back to the clip from Omori, it doesn't necessarily jump out at you, it appears and holds you in suspense. What are you looking at? What is going on? You once saw a happy-go-lucky girl, and now you see a dark void with a body barely visible from the darkness. That feeling of anxiety as you see the characters you control have faces of distress and fear, it makes you uneasy. Then you see you only have two options: fight or run. And you then see what the body is labeled as: a hanging body. And that's when the dread and anxiety sets in fully. That's how psychological horror scares you, not through cheap jump scares or spilling guts, but the feeling of distrust found within you. There are many factors psychological horror uses to instill a sense of paranoia, doubt, and anxiety. These factors generally narrow down to atmosphere, ambiguity, subtle yet unnerving details, and the feeling that something is off. For example, let's take the classic movie, The Shining. At this point in the movie, you've seen hallucinations, you've been left in scenes of eerie silence, and you've heard warnings about room 237. A sense of paranoia is already established. You know something is off, but you can't tell what, and your mind is trying to fill in the blanks. Here in this scene, we see Danny, the little boy in the movie, playing with his toy cars when suddenly a ball rolls into his toy, which grabs his attention. The camera view changes to him looking down this hallway, with a sound playing to add to the eeriness of the atmosphere. The hallway is narrow and empty, which creates the atmosphere of uneasiness. Already knowing that something had to cause the ball to roll over to Danny, he stands up and begins walking, where the camera view enters his perspective. And then you see a door barely open, with it being labeled room 237, the same room that Danny was warned to avoid. These subtle yet screaming details make you feel anxious. Then, as Danny peers inside the room, he walks inside with the scene now fading away. Later, when Danny is seen, he has a mark on his neck, later telling his mother that a lady tried strangling him. You don't know who this lady is, you don't know what exactly went down in that room, but you don't even know how the lady even got in there. That leaves a sense of ambiguity. In this scene alone, an atmosphere is established, a sense of ambiguity is created. Subtle details worsen the way you feel about the situation, and the viewer already knows that something is off. Those four things work in tandem to fill the viewer with dread, and although not every scene will possess these elements. In many horror movies, you will find these four base mechanics of ambiguity, subtlety, atmosphere, and hints of knowing not everything is as it seems. That simple formula is how psychological horror frightens their audience.